The CEO of a well-known company had a problem: employees were slacking off, morale was low, and productivity was dropping. But he couldn't figure out why. Reports looked fine on paper, but something felt off. That's when he decided to bring in a secret observer, someone no one would suspect. His mother. She was sharp, observant, and had a no-nonsense attitude. Most importantly, nobody in the office knew what she looked like. The CEO rarely spoke about his family, and she had never visited the company before. It was the perfect plan. She agreed immediately. "Let me see what's really going on," she said. The next day, she arrived at the office dressed as a janitor, worn-out clothes, a cleaning cart, and a name tag with a fake identity. The security guards barely glanced at her. To them, she was just another worker there to clean. As she pushed her cart through the halls, she kept her head down but her eyes open. The first thing she noticed: the break room. Employees were supposed to take 15-minute breaks, but groups of them were sitting there for over an hour, laughing, scrolling on their phones, and ignoring their work. Some even left their desks for long, unexplained absences. Then came the gossip. Loud, unprofessional conversations filled the hallways. People badmouthed their bosses, mocked clients, and even bragged about cutting corners. They didn't care who heard, after all, who would listen to a janitor? But she listened. And she remembered every word. The worst part? The lying. One employee called in sick while sitting in the break room, eating snacks and joking with coworkers. Another spent half the day shopping online instead of finishing a project. By the end of her first day, the CEO's mother had seen enough. She returned home and handed her son a detailed list of everything she witnessed. His face darkened as he read it. "This ends tomorrow," he said. Little did the employees know, their days at the company were numbered. The janitor they ignored? She was the one person who could change everything. And she was just getting started. The next morning, the CEO's mother arrived at the office even earlier than before. This time, she wasn't just observing, she was testing the employees. She started in the IT department. A group of workers were huddled around a computer, watching sports highlights instead of fixing a server issue that had been reported hours ago. One of them leaned back in his chair, laughing. "Relax, nobody's checking. We'll say it took longer to fix." She pretended to mop the floor nearby, her ears sharp. Next, she moved to the sales team. A young employee was on a personal call, complaining loudly about how much he hated his job. "Yeah, I just pretend to work. They don't even notice," he bragged to his friend. The CEO's mother clenched her jaw but kept sweeping. Then, something shocking happened. Near the executive offices, two managers were whispering in a hallway. They thought they were alone. "Did you tweak the numbers like I asked?" one said. "Yeah, but if the CEO finds out." "He won't. He trusts us." Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just laziness, this was fraud. She quickly texted her son a coded message. He replied immediately, "Keep going. I need proof." So she did. At lunch, she saw a group of employees sneak out early, 2 hours early, to go to a nearby bar. One of them even joked, "If anyone asks, we're at a client meeting." Meanwhile, hardworking employees who actually cared about their jobs sat at their desks, stressed and overworked. One woman stayed late to finish a project, sighing as her coworkers left early yet again. The CEO's mother made sure to note everything. By the end of the day, she had names, times, and even recordings, where legal, of the worst offenders. She handed it all to her son that night. He didn't say much. Just nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "this ends." The next morning, the office buzzed with its usual noise, keyboard clicks, phone calls, and the occasional laugh from those who thought they were untouchable. But something was different. The CEO arrived earlier than usual, his expression unreadable. Behind him, 2 security guards stood near the entrance, their presence unusual enough to make a few employees glance up nervously. Meanwhile, his mother, still disguised as the quiet janitor, wheeled her cleaning cart through the halls one last time. Today, she wasn't just watching. She was waiting. The first sign of trouble came when the head of sales was called into the CEO's office. The man walked in confidently, smirking as if expecting praise. 5 minutes later, he stormed out, face red, clutching a termination letter. "You can't do this," he shouted. The CEO's voice cut through the sudden silence. "I just did." One by one, employees were called in. The IT guys who had watched sports instead of working? Fired on the spot. The sales rep who bragged about pretending to work? Packed up his desk in stunned silence. Then came the biggest shock. The 2 managers who had been faking reports were escorted out by security, their access badges deactivated before they even reached the elevator. One of them turned to the CEO, desperation in his voice. "You don't understand, we were just—" "I understand perfectly," the CEO said coldly. "And so will the authorities." The office was dead silent now. Employees stared at their screens, suddenly very interested in their work. The ones who had actually been doing their jobs exchanged glances, some relieved, others nervous. The CEO stepped into the hallway, addressing the entire floor. "From now on, this company runs on honesty and hard work. If that's a problem for anyone, leave now." Not a single person moved. As the fired employees cleared out, the CEO's mother finally removed her janitor's cap, revealing her identity to the stunned staff. Gasps filled the room. The woman they'd ignored for days was the reason their careless coworkers were gone. And she wasn't sorry. The office was in shock. Employees whispered behind their hands, staring at the woman they dismissed as just the janitor. The CEO's mother stood tall, her sharp eyes scanning the room one last time before turning to leave. One brave intern spoke up. "Ma'am, how long were you watching us?" She paused. "Long enough." That simple answer sent chills through the room. As she walked toward the exit, something unexpected happened. A junior accountant, one of the few who actually worked hard, stood up abruptly. "Wait." Everyone held their breath. The young woman hesitated, then said quietly, "Thank you." A murmur spread through the office. Others nodded, employees who had been carrying extra work while their coworkers slacked off. The CEO's mother gave a small, approving smile before disappearing into the elevator. Meanwhile, the remaining staff waited nervously. What would happen next? Would more people be fired? Would the CEO punish everyone? But when the CEO returned to the floor, he didn't yell. Instead, he did something surprising: he listened. "Anyone who wants to speak honestly about what's been happening here," he announced, "my door is open. No consequences. Just truth." At first, no one moved. Then, one by one, the honest employees began coming forward. They talked about the toxic culture, the pressure to cover for lazy coworkers, the frustration of seeing cheaters rewarded. The CEO took notes. His mother's mission had exposed the rot, now it was time to rebuild. That afternoon, new rules appeared on the company boards. Transparent workloads, no more hiding who was really doing the work. Anonymous reporting, a safe way to voice concerns. Rewards for merit, only real effort would be recognized. But the biggest change? Starting Monday, every executive, including the CEO, would spend 1 day each month doing entry-level jobs in their own company. No one would be invisible anymore. As employees left work that day, the atmosphere had already shifted. Some looked nervous. Others, the ones who had always worked hard, walked a little taller. One thing was certain: the days of taking advantage were over. The following Monday morning, the office felt like an entirely different world. The coffee machine area, once a gossip hub where people wasted hours, now had employees grabbing quick drinks before hurrying back to their desks. The break room clock was suddenly the most watched object in the building. The CEO arrived wearing a maintenance staff uniform. Gasps rippled through the open workspace as employees did double takes. He grabbed a cleaning cart identical to the one his mother had used. First Monday of the month, he reminded everyone. Leadership Rotation Day. For the next 8 hours, the CEO emptied trash bins, wiped down surfaces, and, most importantly, listened. Employees initially froze when he came near, terrified of saying the wrong thing. But by afternoon, something remarkable happened. A young designer hesitantly approached as he cleaned the copier area. "Sir, can I ask something?" He didn't look up from wiping the glass. "Today I'm not, sir." "What's on your mind?" "The reports we fixed last week, were they really that bad?" This was the opening others had been waiting for. Nearby employees subtly turned their chairs to listen. The CEO straightened up, tossing his rag into the cart. The numbers were falsified to hide 3 months of declining performance. The people responsible nearly sank this entire company. A beat of silence. But the team that caught the errors? They're getting promotions. The message was clear: honesty would be rewarded. Meanwhile, in accounting, the department head was learning this lesson the hard way. After spending 2 hours struggling with basic data entry, a task she'd always dismissed as easy, she stormed into the break room, and came face to face with the CEO holding a mop. Their silent standoff lasted 3 seconds before she turned on her heel and went back to work. By 5 p.m., 3 things became obvious. No job was as simple as it looked. Executives were exhausted from easy tasks. Respect had to be earned. The hardest workers got quiet nods from leadership. The culture was changing, and not everyone would adapt. As the CEO changed back into his suit, his assistant handed him a note. 3 employees had resigned. He wasn't surprised. The note continued: 12 others had submitted process improvement ideas. That was the trade-off. The company would lose the people who wanted the old way, and keep those willing to grow. The 3 resignations hit the office like aftershocks. First was the senior account manager, the one who used to disappear for client lunches that lasted all afternoon. Then the tech support guy who famously napped in the server room. Last was the office administrator who'd been running her online boutique from her work computer. Their exit interviews were telling. "This just isn't the relaxed place I signed up for anymore. I don't see why we have to be monitored like criminals. You're taking all the fun out of working here." The CEO read these comments without reaction. These weren't losses, they were necessary corrections. But one resignation gave him pause. Mark from logistics, a quiet, efficient worker who'd never caused trouble, left a single sentence: "I can't work beside people who get rewarded for doing what I've always done." That stung. Meanwhile, a new problem was brewing. The previously lazy employees who'd survived the purge were now overcompensating hard. The sales department became a war zone of one-upmanship. Karen from marketing sent emails at 2 a.m. The design team practically lived in the office, ordering takeout for dinner every night. The CEO's mother noticed immediately when she visited that Friday. "You fixed one problem and created another," she said bluntly over dinner at her son's apartment. He sighed. "I know. But how do I tell people to work less without sounding like I want them to slack off again?" She stirred her tea. "You don't. You show them." The next Monday brought another surprise. The CEO announced mandatory clock-out times. No emails after 7 p.m. Weekend work required special approval. HR would monitor overtime. Employees didn't know whether to be relieved or suspicious. Then came the real culture shock: monthly efficiency bonuses for teams that met goals without overtime. The message was revolutionary: working smart beat working yourself to death. But old habits died hard. At 6:45 p.m. on Wednesday, the CEO walked through the office flicking lights off. "Go home," he ordered surprised employees. "Your jobs will still be here tomorrow." Some resisted. One programmer hid in the bathroom until the CEO left, then returned to his desk, only to find his login disabled after hours. The next morning, a sign appeared in the break room. "This company runs on trust. If we can't trust you to rest, how can we trust you to work?" The new "Work Smart" policy created an unexpected division in the office. While some employees embraced the balanced approach, others struggled to break their old habits. The atmosphere was tense, like a classroom full of students unsure how much they could get away with after a strict substitute teacher arrived. One Thursday afternoon, the CEO received an anonymous message through the new feedback system. "People are scared to make mistakes now. Nobody wants to be the next one fired. Are we trading laziness for fear?" The words stuck with him. That evening, he called his mother. "You wanted accountability," she reminded him. But culture change isn't about punishment, it's about showing people a better way. The next morning, the CEO did something nobody expected. He called an all-hands meeting and made a very public mistake. Standing before the entire company, he pulled up a financial projection slide, with glaring errors in the calculations. The room went silent. Then, to everyone's shock, he laughed. "See that? I messed up. My CFO caught it before this meeting, and guess what? The company didn't collapse." He leaned forward. "Mistakes aren't the problem, hiding them is." The effect was immediate. Shoulders relaxed across the room. A junior designer in the front row actually exhaled for what seemed like the first time in weeks. But the real test came that afternoon. The logistics team, now short-staffed after Mark's resignation, miscalculated a shipment, sending 500 units to the wrong client. Under the old culture, they would have covered it up. Now, they reported it immediately. Instead of firing anyone, the CEO helped them craft a solution. By day's end, the client received a discount for the inconvenience. A new tracking system was implemented. The team stayed late, voluntarily, to fix the error. Something had shifted. Meanwhile, across town, Mark sat at his kitchen table, staring at a job offer from a competitor. The pay was better. The workload seemed lighter. But something nagged at him. His phone buzzed. A text from his former coworker. "You wouldn't recognize the place. They actually let us breathe now. Still sucks without you though." Mark hesitated, then opened his laptop. The company's careers page showed a single new listing: Logistics Process Coordinator, new position. The description included words he'd never seen before: sustainable pace, error-friendly environment, people over perfection. He stared at the screen for a long time. Back at the office, the CEO watched as employees actually left on time for once. The cleaning crew came through, real cleaners this time, and one of them nodded at him respectfully. For the first time in months, the place felt healthy. The real test came 3 weeks later. A major client demanded a complete project redesign, with half the original timeline. The kind of request that would have caused chaos in the old days. The CEO gathered his team. "We have 2 choices," he said. "The old way, burnout, all-nighters, cutting corners. Or we prove our new system works." To everyone's surprise, it was Karen from marketing who spoke up first. "Let's do it right." What happened next defied all expectations. The design team divided the work strategically instead of heroically. The sales department protected creative time by handling client updates. Even the interns were given meaningful tasks with clear boundaries. No one hid in the bathroom to work late. No one lied about progress. When problems arose, they were shared openly, and solved collectively. At 6:02 p.m. on deadline day, the project was completed. Not just done, but exceptional. The client called it the best work we've ever seen from your company. That same afternoon, HR received an unexpected application. Mark stood in the lobby, shifting nervously. "I'd like to apologize," he told the CEO. "And if possible, I'd like my job back." The CEO didn't hesitate. "Your position's been upgraded. You'll be training others in sustainable workflows." The final surprise came when the CEO's mother visited one last time, this time openly, as herself. She walked through departments not to inspect, but to observe. What she saw: employees leaving on time with accomplished smiles. Laughter that wasn't at someone else's expense. A help board where teams documented solutions instead of hiding them. At lunch, she finally gave her verdict. "You didn't just clean house," she told her son. "You built a home." The company's next quarterly report told the story. Productivity up 40%. Employee retention at record highs. Profits exceeding projections. But the real victory came every morning, when employees actually wanted to come to work. When the janitorial staff was greeted by name. When mistakes led to improvements rather than blame. The CEO kept one reminder on his desk, his mother's original janitor name tag. Not as a threat, but as a promise. True success means seeing everyone. A year later, the company hosted its first ever Open Doors Day, an event where family members could see where their loved ones worked. The office buzzed with laughter and conversation, a far cry from the tense, secretive atmosphere of the past. The CEO stood near the entrance, greeting guests personally. His mother, now a familiar face around the office, moved through the crowd like a proud grandmother at a family reunion. She paused by the break room, where a group of children sat at a makeshift kids' conference table, coloring pictures of mommy and daddy at work. One little girl looked up at her with wide eyes. "Are you the boss lady?" She chuckled. "No, sweetheart. I'm just the one who helps remind people to do their best." Meanwhile, Mark, now head of the productivity optimization team, showed visitors around the logistics department. His wife squeezed his hand as he explained the new workflow system. "I can't believe this is the same place you used to complain about," she whispered. The most powerful moment came when the cleaning staff, the real cleaning staff, were invited to cut the ribbon for the new employee lounge. Maria, who had worked nights at the company for 12 years, wiped tears from her eyes as the CEO handed her the scissors. "This company sees us now," she told her coworkers in Spanish. As the event wound down, a young intern approached the CEO nervously. "Sir, I was wondering, could we make the janitor rotation program permanent? Not just for executives, but for all new hires?" The room fell quiet. The CEO's mother raised an eyebrow, waiting for his response. He smiled. "I think that's an excellent idea. Everyone should understand how this company really runs, from the ground up." That night, as the last guests left, the CEO and his mother stood looking at the empty office. The same space that had once been filled with secrets and resentment now hummed with the energy of a fresh start. "You know," she said finally, "a clean floor is nice. But a clean conscience? That's what lasts." He nodded, looking at the framed first dollar the company ever made, now displayed alongside photos of team events and employee milestones. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Outside, the city lights twinkled as the janitorial staff began their evening rounds. But tonight, they didn't work alone. The CEO grabbed a spare mop and joined them, not as a boss, but as someone who finally understood. The CEO grabbed a spare mop and joined them, not as a boss, but as someone who finally understood. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang. A new client. A new challenge. A new chance to do things differently. But that could wait until morning. 6 months after Open Doors Day, something unexpected happened. The company's story went viral. A junior employee had written about their cultural transformation on a professional forum, and within weeks, business magazines and news outlets were knocking on their door. The CEO sat with his leadership team, debating whether to engage with the sudden publicity. This could help change workplace culture everywhere, Mark argued. The CFO countered, or it could make us look like we're bragging. The deciding vote came from an unlikely source, Maria from the cleaning staff. When my son heard our story, she said quietly, he asked his boss why they don't respect their janitors. That matters. They agreed to one carefully controlled interview with a respected business journal. But when the article dropped with the headline, "From Janitors to CEOs, How One Company Learned to See Its People," the response was overwhelming. But the most surprising development came when the original fired employees, the ones who had slacked off and been let go, began reaching out. Not with anger, but with apologies. One former manager wrote, "Losing this job was the wake-up call I needed. I'm running a smaller company now, but we're doing it your way." The CEO's mother, now semi-retired but still consulting, took special satisfaction in these messages. People can change, she noted at a team lunch. Sometimes they just need the right consequences, and the right opportunity. As the company prepared to expand to a second location, they faced their biggest challenge yet. On opening day of the new office, the CEO arrived early to help set up. He found his mother already there, arranging chairs in the conference room. "You don't have to do that," he said, taking some boxes from her. She smiled. "I know. But good work isn't about what you have to do, it's about what you choose to do." As the first employees arrived, they found something unexpected on every desk, not company swag, but a simple notepad with the words, "What did you see today?" embossed on the cover. The message was clear: the work of truly seeing each other never ends. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson of all.